What a position we have on the board here. White has 3 pawns, black has the bishop. What's happening? How do you assess such a position? And how did they reach such a position? This is the game between Anton David and Aryan Tari from round 5 of the Tata Steel Masters 2021. And well, the game actually happened from a dull Berlin endgame, and knight h4 was played by black. This is one of those moves which Wesley So has championed recently. And here David Anton came up with the novelty of knight e4. And at some point over here, it started becoming really claustrophobic for black because of these two rooks coming in with the bishop threatening a mate. So black had to pick up this pawn and be brave and find his chances, but he went f6. And actually here you can see how white built up a beautiful attack with his rooks and the opposite color bishops. This was tremendous. The way the attack was built up was so classy. Here you can see rook g5 is threatened with a mate, so had to go rook f5, and now the bishop came to e1. And while the number of pawns on the board are equal, you can see that these pawns are so much more potent. So white went in, started to attack from behind, pushed the pawns here, but the main problem was that white should have already begun to push his pawns somewhere here, but he went behind black's pawns, and that is where black got his chance. Here rook takes e5, excellent move by Aryan. Rook e5 a3. Now you must take b2. The pawn is about to queen, so he went back, and this is where we reach this position. Now my question to you is this position winning or drawn? And I had Rajabov with me when we were analyzing this game. He is a world-class GM, and even he was finding it very difficult to find his bearings here. Before we go into this game, I want to show you a position which will help you to understand something very closely. Now, usually what happens is when you have 3 pawns coming at you, you feel very scared. And this is the position which really helped me to improve my understanding of when facing against 3 pawns. So here you can see 3 black pawns are coming down at the white king. But white has 2 pawns which are going that side. So my question to you is, how should white win this position? Mind you, there's only one move that can help you to win here, and you have to pause the video and find that move. Let's see if you can do it. Okay, now here's the trick. The right move here is king to g1. If you found this move, unbelievable. Well done. Excellent work. The point is that this is a position where none of white pawns can move forward. And if you make a mistake somewhere on this side and these 3 pawns start rolling, you may lose the game. But king g1 has a very subtle point, and this was explained to me by one of my trainers when I was young. Whichever black pawn moves forward, the white king will go in front of that pawn and then stop black's pawns advancing. Look how it works. Suppose you play h3, I go king h2. Now you can't play g3 because you'll lose this pawn. If you play f3, I go king g3. Once again, all the pawns are locked up. The same thing happens if you go g3, I go king g2. If you go f3, I go king f2. And all the pawns will be locked up. Imagine that in this position, you play a move like king h2. Now, there are many ways. There are 2 ways for black to win. But h3 is the most clean way, because now it's white who is in a zugzwang. He has to move, and when he moves, then the pawns start rolling once again. You can't do a thing about it. In fact, this is just over now. Black pawns queened. This is exactly what you wanted to avoid, but you couldn't. So that's the reason why it was very important here always to play king to g1 and place your king in front of whichever pawn that advances. Once you do that, it's all over. Black king, if it has, say for example, f3 king f2, h3 king g3, now can't move, so have to move your king a7 and white wins. The reason why I showed you this example is because in this game that we are looking between Aryan Tari, Anton David and Aryan Tari, we see that there are 3 pawns which are facing the black king. So this is where we left off. Let me get the position. Yes. And these 3 pawns, you have to understand, can be stopped by the black king. It's not that he cannot stop it, but he has to be careful. Now, here white should have begun with the move a4, but as Rajabo explained to me, that the fact that the king is coming from f5 to e4, and you have to make a move like, let's say, g3 here, is really not appetizing. And that is the reason why king f2 was played by David Anton. Now, whether a4 wins or not is still has to be analyzed deeply, but it gives, I feel it's a draw, but it still gives white better chances than in the game. So king f2, bishop c2, good move, stopping now the pawn from advancing. King g4 was played. c5, nice move by Aryan. King e3, king f6, king d2, and bishop a4. So now you see black wants to put his bishop here so that it creates a fortress, and his king will deal with these 3 pawns as we have already seen. h4 was played. Now a very strong threat coming in is h5. If let's say white gets in this move, then his pawns will further advance, which would be very dangerous. So Aryan very quickly goes bishop d7. I like this idea, hitting this pawn. Now if you go g5, king f5, very important move. And let's say you now go king c3, black has the time to take this pawn. Why? Because now if king c4, you have let's say king g4, g6, king f5 or king h5, both are okay. King c5 and king g6. Notice if you would have taken here king h4, king c5, king g5, this also could have been fine, but it's a touch and go, like a4, king g6, a3, king here, a6. Now you have to go here, a7, and bishop f3. So basically, this is the way in which a draw could have taken place with g5. In the game, f5 was played, bishop a4, king e3, c4 was played, and now white had to be careful. He had to go for the move king d4, when after bishop d1, I believe the game would have ended in a draw, because after bishop g4, you pick up these pawns with the king, and then this bishop will stop the a pawn. But David Anton got a little bit too ambitious. He played king f4, which was a blunder. Now here, after c3, pawn push, he played it g5, king went back to f7, and king e3. And I want you to pause this video and think, how would you play here with black? Black to play, it's a very, very nice position. And in fact, this is one where you will learn a lot about what we saw. Yeah, the king versus 3 pawns. Although it doesn't come much into effect here, you can learn a bit about it. So firstly, it's very important to find the move bishop b5, cutting the king off. And not just cutting the king off, you can see that if all the pawn moves were extinguished, then the king has no move by which it can stop the pawn. So imagine if it is white to move and he moves the king anywhere where it can go to, black simply queens the pawn. That means that here, if the pawn moves are over, white loses the game. So h5, and now I like this move king g8. You remember, whichever pawn advances, you can put the king in front of that pawn. Here, because you have so many bishop moves like bishop a6, bishop b5, the zugzwang position is not going to occur. After a4, bishop a6, a5, bishop b5, and now after g6, say king g7, the pawns are stopped. Or if you go h6, I can go king h7. You see the same concept, putting the king in front of the pawn. And now white has to make his move, something, let's say f6, king g6. And once the king moves, the pawn queens. This was a very, very nice winning opportunity that was missed by Aryan Tari. He pushed the pawn. Instead of blocking here with bishop b5, he pushed it. And then after king d2, the players agreed to a draw here because no longer it was possible to make progress. And yeah, that was the game. But I hope you understood how a king deals with these three pawns in such a position. And also kudos to Aryan Tari for fighting hard, and also for David Anton for not, you know, for fighting till the very end. Both of them great fighters. This is Sagar Shah signing off. Hope you enjoyed this video. Bye bye.